What's going on, YouTube? So once again, Angry Hogs with another video. So this is a video about 5 tips on how to successfully breed hognose snakes. Again, this isn't a how to breed them. This is more of a if you're starting to breed or you're already a breeder, just a few ideas to consider when successfully breeding hognose snakes. Right. So tip number 1 is maturity. I know this might be a little basic or repetitive because we hear it all the time. Make sure your animal's up to age. So here at Angry Hogs, we prefer age versus weight, and that's why we don't really weigh our animals unless it's necessary. However, I think it's important to consider the age of your animal to be the number 1 tip. I'm not sure how much he weighs, and he's gonna bite me. He always bites me, the little dude. So he's a whopping 37 grams. All right, chicos. So this is an animal that I wouldn't try until midsummer. Obviously he's nice, little good weight. He's right at the verge of being mature, but again, I prefer age versus weight. So in my opinion, he needs to wait until the middle of the summer in order to get tried on a female. And so that's for males. Now for females, we're talking about something a little bit different, right? This is a 3.5, almost 4-year-old female. She laid 38 healthy, perfectly healthy eggs, and she's a proven breeder, right? So we have a female that, let's see how much she weighs. So she's 216 grams, guys. 216 grams. She laid 38 eggs in total between 2 clutches. And there's no problem with weight. A lot of people say, oh, you got to make sure that they're 250 grams. No, that's not true. You have to wait until they're mature, and don't power feed them to be up to weight. Like, weight is really not that relevant when you are talking about maturity, right? It's just a tangible thing that you can measure to make sure they're there. So just use weight as what it is intended for, a measuring tool. So you measure it, but time is really going to give you the maturity that it needs in order for them to reproduce and have a higher success rate to reproduce these animals. Tip number 2 is going to be brumation. Make sure you have either a wine cooler or a fridge that you've converted into a hibernaculum, or if you have a different building, a different room, a basement, a room where you can brumate them and get them really down on temperature. Okay, so brumation is going to be, it's going to allow you to cycle your animal reproductively, to cycle it, to be able to get it ready for next season. Biologically speaking, it's also going to ask it to start reproducing, different hormones, sexual reproductive hormones. So that way, when they come out of brumation, they're already cycled. So it's a good way to cycle your animals, your hognoses, so that way they can have a better success rate on reproducing for you. If you don't brumate, I know a lot of people have had success on not brumating their animals, but again, it's just a way that you can control. You can control the ability to reproduce them, because if you don't cycle them, well, you're just kind of throwing a Hail Mary. You're basically trying out your luck. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? At least if you brumate them, you'll understand that, okay, well, I brumated them. This is the beginning of their cycle. And a lot of people think that all you got to do is bring the temperature down. But again, these are reactive animals. They respond to stimuli, okay? So a part of the stimuli is the sun, is the light. We have them in a captive environment to replicate what's happening in the wild, okay? So the most important thing is to consider these 2 factors, temperature as well as light. So it's got to be complete darkness, because if light is hitting their eyes, well, they're responding to that. Biologically, light does it produces a lot of things biologically. You could brumate them as pairs. Have them pre-copulate before brumation, and also copulate post-brumation. Okay, so you can put them together so that way they can do their thing, and females can retain sperm. And then during the cycling of the breeding season through brumation, then when they come out of brumation, they already have retained sperm, and then you still put them together. Okay, so that's another thing that a lot of people may try, and you might have some success in putting them together, because in the wild they hibernate in groups. So you have, females and males all in one hibernaculum. It only makes sense that when they come out of hibernating, well, guess what? You're already copulating, because there's females and males. They hibernate in the same places. So, and when they come out of hibernation, they come out in groups, and they take advantage of the opportunity. So that's another thing that you might want to try to imitate what's happening in the wild. And then tip number 4 is you want to do a feeding cycle. So in my opinion, what tends to work for me is less is more. So a lot of people might think that feeding big rodents or 30-gram adult mice is what's best for the animal. But less is more. There's nothing wrong with feeding them smaller mice, adult mice, at a more consistent rate. Like, for example, I don't feed any of my snakes that are anything that's like 30 grams. I think that's a little bit too large, even if it's a large female. So what I do is I do smaller feeders, and more consistent, more frequent at smaller intervals. Like, for example, I'll do like a 20-gram adult mouse, which is like a small mouse, and I'll feed them like once a week. This is when they're not, when I haven't seen a copulation. But once I see a copulation and I know that they're in breeding season, then I'll go ahead and feed them every 3 to 4 days a smaller meal, because less is more. Like, the thing is to trigger that cycle, trigger that reproductive. Okay, there's a lot of food now that's being offered. There's a lot of if they're starving, or if they sense that there's no food, well, nothing in the wild is going to reproduce. So you want to make sure that they have that guarantee. Hey, like, there's a consistent food. Like, don't worry about producing follicles. You're okay to reproduce, because there's a lot of food available. Tip number 5, guys, is observe your animals. I think if you're going to be breeding the animals, it's only okay and justifiable to observe your animals. Like, you'll be surprised how many things go unnoticed because we don't observe our animals. And I totally get it. There's a lot of us that have to go to work. We have other things to do. We have a life, so we can't all be in the room or in the racks looking at the animals 24/7. But maybe you might want to breed in a time where you can like dedicate them a little bit of time to be observing them and see how they act. Like, for example, my animals or my males don't breed at any given time of the day. I see it more prominent in like 9 to 12 in the morning. And so 8 to 12 is when I've seen all the logs. And I've had really good success rate from that time. I think it's a good tip to observe your animals and take corrective action and adapt to what you're seeing in your observation, so that way you can take the necessary measures and correct or have a better success rate in breeding hognose snakes. Well, guys, this is my video. I hope that you guys have a lot of success, and I'm really interested to see what you guys produce for 2025.